a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Australia's best independent news and opinion radio show, The Daily Australian, with Nicola Charles and Jason Olbourne.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Australian, and welcome to all of our new viewers. I tell you what, we are hearing that we are getting viewers from all parts of the mainstream media now. And welcome, and thanks for your support, and thanks for your scrutiny. And it's perfectly okay to challenge us as we challenge you, but I'm delighted that you are here. And let me tell you, Nicola Charles on Tuesday, July the 8th, episode 128. For mine, sobering is probably the way I feel about the news overnight and this morning and what we're seeing around the world. And we'll talk all about it here because part of this show, presenting the facts that the mainstream tends to want to neglect. Well, we're also going to be in for some really hard-hitting opinions. Welcome back. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, Jason. I feel like we're in the Big Brother house, and I need to say, you know, when they come into that Big Brother room and do their diary report, that's it, the diary room. Come into the diary room, Jason. Big Brother would like to talk to you. Well, who is Big Brother? Who's watching us? Well, I found out yesterday I had confirmation from a former police officer, no doubt, that guests that appear on this show and also on my podcast, they get contacted by the mainstream media, a broadsheet in Australia, no less. I won't name you. I won't name and shame you. It's quite flattering that you watch the shows. And they contact people who we've spoken to. So if you've been on, you may get an email. And they ask them if they are really sure they want to be associated with a conspiracy theorist like Nicola Charles. And they said that she's peddled conspiracy theories in the past. Absolutely extraordinary, Jason. I'd just like to say hi to you all. Thanks for watching. It's great to get the numbers up. And you've got to ask yourself, Jason, what are they so insecure about? Why do they need to watch our show?
It is the big question, isn't it? I mean, I'm glad that they are, because yesterday I talked about the brick wall and then I talked about the pipeline. And there are certain stories that if we don't talk about, don't seem to want to get into the mainstream. And they obviously refer, to child protection's a big one. Medical safety of experimental medication, that's a huge one. What about climate change, for example? 432 parts per million carbon dioxide, but the whole world is going to melt, and we will do absolutely anything we possibly can to change the system, deindustrialize without a suitable replacement. And the mainstream media, you guys get better access to the politicians than we do. Why aren't you asking questions about how it is that this can even be conceivable when only 1.5% of global emissions come out of Australia? We may have already met our net zero targets in terms of how big our forests are capable of converting. Yesterday, we showed you that little simple story about the moss-made bricks in the Netherlands that can soak up all of the CO2 and put out oxygen, for example. Why are there no stories on that? Why isn't that show 3,600 Seconds doing a report on the positives? It's always negative stuff, and admittedly, we have to cover a lot of negative stuff as well. But but we are also looking for solutions. And I don't think the mainstream media really wants to consider that it wants to be the PR company for the government of the day, but it doesn't want to point to solutions. And so yesterday I talked about David McBride being locked up when we talked about, women in the military being abused horrendously by superior officers and some at their own rank. And yet that gains traction. But why not the follow-on to David McBride? Why isn't Michelle Rowland, for example, the new Attorney General placing Mark Dreyfus, why isn't she being pressured to release David McBride or do something to intervene in that case? Now, certainly it's gone to appeal, etc. But there are things that can happen to be able to change the narrative in these circumstances. But what's happening? The reason that the mainstream media is here is because they know that no one trusts them anymore, or fewer people trust them than they used to be. And they're coming to us to see what we're talking about, obviously to see what they can debunk and to boost themselves. And on occasion, they're going to find that maybe, just maybe, these two people at this end of town who have certainly, gone through some grief over the last 10 years, and there are reasons that we do what we do. Yeah. And find out that what we are saying is working out to be better than what they're saying.
I think, Jason, they're following the audience, right? They're wondering where all their audience has gone, because where they are, it's crickets. Right. So they're following the audience, and they've got all the data, right? They've got all these machinery, AI, and they know where the audiences are going. And they follow us over here. And I would hazard a guess that if you work for one of these giant news organizations and you've been given your marching orders, that you will get your stories daily from a central source, and then you will put them into your own words. And that's what we're releasing. They can't sit on their computers at work or even on their work phones and do the kind of research that we can do on this show. So they let us do the research, Jason, that they can't do on their equipment, right? Because there would be a trail. And then they just, come out to bat on the things that we're talking about. But they're doing it in such a sneaky way. And I was ticked off initially. And then I thought, you know what? We rip into mainstream media for being extremely ineffective, a complete letdown, traitorous during this time in history for Australians. So I thought, fair enough. What do I expect? If I go after them, they're going to come after me. But it was crazy seeing absolute irrefutable proof written down. Now we know. Now we know why, Nicola Charles at least has been blacklisted. So thanks, guys.
Well, I'm on that list too, from a different perspective. But when you go through the process and you present fact after fact, like literally started in front of a camera, more or less reporting COVID statistics of government websites that weren't being interpreted on those 11 o'clock press conferences. And there they were in real time. And you could do the mathematics to show it, simply put, because all the data was there. How many cases? How many hospitalizations? How many deaths, all broken up in age group. And I maintain, here's a fact that the mainstream media probably still isn't aware of, and they can certainly go and verify it. But up until the release of the injections for COVID in February of 2021, not a single Australian female under the age of 50 died from COVID. And that is the original strain and the Delta strain, because the jab arrived as the Omicron came out, which was meant to be far more easily spread and therefore less virulent, less dangerous, and less deaths. So the vaccine was already out of date by the time it was created, based on antibody shapes, etc., what it's meant to do. And so it was peddled in such a way, and then these mass of deaths started post that situation. So you wonder, is it either caused by, the jab itself directly, or was the jab creating a weakness in immune systems that meant that Omicron was suddenly more deadlier than it would have been? And the perfect test in that was how many unvaccinated people died from Omicron COVID versus those that were vaccinated that died from generally Omicron COVID. So it's such an interesting case. And what was also fascinating at the time was this was around about the time when Clive Palmer also got COVID, and Clive ended up in a hospital, and they said that he was basically going to die, and they wanted to do all the things that they were going to do at that point, and telling him to get vaccinated after he already had COVID. And of course, he got himself out of there, and he got some ivermectin from a certain person, and a professional, and then he was on the road very quickly to recovery at that point. So that's a perfect example yet again. So for the mainstreamers that are watching, go check it out. Better still, come on the show and talk to us. Talk to us off camera, but talk to us like professionals, because we are on the same team. We're not meant to be enemies. And here's the other thing, right? We are going through an information war. It's obvious. The mainstream has to accept this now, because otherwise there wouldn't be people like us doing what we're doing and attracting an audience and becoming professional at doing it.
Correct.
But if we are going through a revolution, shouldn't we, if we're aiming for something better and not just the survival of the species, because that makes no sense in an information age, that we should be going backwards rather than forwards? And it's bad enough that our governments convince us that things only ever get worse than get better. Like, there's nothing today that's better than what it was 10 years ago on any metric. Show me something that's better today than it was a decade ago or 20 years ago. The trajectory is wrong. Why does it have to be so difficult? Shouldn't it be done through ease and comfort and simplicity and desire and confidence and all of these great things to get ahead? Because when you in your own life are doing well, you have a good job, the income's coming in, you decide that you meet someone, you fall in love, you want to get married, you buy a house, start a family, all of these great things in your life, they generally come with ease. You don't wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, it's a tough life today. I'll go get married. That's okay, my life is better. Oh my God, my life is tough. That's what I'm going to do. Go out and borrow $1 million and buy a house. Okay, my life is better. It doesn't happen that way. It happens because things are going well for you, and so it is that things come to you. But everything at the moment is so difficult, such a resistance. We're in such a panic to believe the hive mind that the world is going to melt if we don't all turn off our power and suffer and stop eating meat and do all these things to punish ourselves like we hate ourselves. And it makes no sense. And through this self-loathing comes the loathing and the blame of other people, and then it leads to other things. And we have this constant war in this country. Like, why do we honestly care about wars on the other side of the planet when all we want to do here is try and put a roof over our head and feed our kids and say, as Albanese tells us, that Australia is going to make her own decisions and we're going to be separate from the world, and yet follow all these globalist plans? So in other words, we shouldn't be caring what's going on in Israel or Gaza or Ukraine or Russia or anything like that. If we're not part of that, that's their problem. Now, yes, we can be all lefties and worry about everything and everyone, but let's worry about our own plate first. If you don't own a house and you're worried about it and you're trying to demand that a billionaire in Australia pays your rent for the next 25 years because that's your level, you're wrong. Worry about yourself. No one should be renting a home in this country. Everyone should have the opportunity to achieve the Australian dream, but you don't achieve that by stealing from the rich and giving it to the poor and creating entitlement, because what you're going to do is 2 years down the track, like any lotto winner that's unprepared for a $5 or $10 million win, doesn't have any money left. They've spent it all. So that system doesn't work. In other words, there is a process here to appreciate what you accumulate and what you build and what you develop. And you will know this, that people who've bought their first homes and made a lot of money back in the early 2000s when the big boom thing was on, what they did and they were programmed to do was to go and upstamp their mortgages. So let's say they bought a home for $200,000-$300,000. It went up to $400,000-$500,000, and suddenly they had $200,000 equity. The bank was happy to knock on the door and say, hey, we'll lend you another $160,000 against that increase. So people borrowed the money. And what did they do? They went and bought $50,000 SUVs. They went on $25,000 trips. They went and did the things that you would do when money is easy to come about. And then all of a sudden, you've got your car. Your car's now only worth $25,000. Your holiday, you've spent the money and whatever. And now you're holding a $360,000 mortgage on a $500,000 house that you could have paid off 2 years ago. And then there was this cycle that went on until people realized that you can't support a $750,000 mortgage anymore at that stage. So you try and consolidate your debt. So it's a weird situation that we want to have our cake, eat it too, but not understand how we get into this mess and how we get out of this mess. And so cooperation's a big part of it, but you've also got to come up with a great set of ideas. And sadly, at this stage in the game, we're still at the debate stage, but at least we're trying to get to the debate. So I'm saying to the people, you guys will dismiss me and say, oh, he's a nobody, an invisible man, a conspiracy theorist, an idiot. But honestly, Karl Stefanovic, I asked people the other day, could I hold my own against Karl? And they all said you could. They said you'd probably beat him. That's no disrespect to Karl. He's a seasoned journalist, 25 years, but we certainly do see things differently. So I'm just putting it out there. If anyone wants to debate from the mainstream media, reach out to us. Let's work together to make Australia better than it is, and better than it was 10 years ago, and better than it is today. And I don't really care who's in government anymore, because all of them are proving that they're not doing a good enough job. But we, the people, are the ones that need to change things and make things better, because governments can't do it, and they don't serve us, and the evidence is out there to say that they are not serving our interests, but they love to tell us that it's our fault, and they're going to demand all these different things to make things work. And I'll play a clip a little bit later about Jacinda Allen yet again with the whole hate speech stuff and how she wants to play it. But this is the problem. Another review, another thing, another restriction. Forget it. We're human beings. We don't want to be instructed. We want to live our own lives, and we're more than capable of doing it without the government babying us and nannying us any longer. Done, over it. Get lost.
Yeah, I'm getting less political by the day as well. And I think that governments are not fit for purpose. You know, they're certainly not
I
working
agree.
for the people while taking a salary called public service for working for the people. But the mainstream media do have a case to answer here, because when you are publishing stories that say Australians, your people, your demographic, your readers, your listeners, your watchers, when you're producing stories that say Australians under 50 are getting cancers at 10 times the normal rate, and doctors are baffled and you don't know why, and you are treating Australians as if they are so stupid. I remember you in the mainstream media. I know what you do and how you treat Australians. You publish stories like the average Australian IQ is 99. Well, the average Australian IQ is 100, but you made it 99 to make it look worse. You put it one under, like selling something for $5.99 instead of $6. That's what you did. Now, it may be true that Australians, when you average it out, have a reasonably low IQ, but that doesn't mean you harm them. That doesn't mean you lie to them. That's like saying cruelty to animals is fine because they don't have a very high IQ. No, it's not. And you are saying to people, you are peddling this crap that nobody knows why everyone's getting cancer. You know why everyone is getting cancer. If you're watching this show and other shows like it, you know why Australians are getting cancer, and you are betraying them when you lie to them that it is this baffling situation that no one can work out. And in the future, you'll be held to account for that. But the problem is you're being held to account for it now by your viewers, by your readers, by your listeners. That's why you followed them over here. And now you want to know what we're saying.
Well said. Tell you what, let me share, because I just gave that headline out when you were speaking. Let me share your post, therefore. So this is based on that same thing, right? This same article. So the ABC coming out and saying Australians aged in their 30s and 40s are experiencing unprecedented and in some cases world-leading rates of 10 different types of cancer, and scientists are desperate to understand why. So you wrote, it's a tough one. Let me think. Okay, got it. My conspiracy theory. Our own government sanctioned a biological attack on its people to meet EU depopulation targets for natives of the Five Eyes nations. Hope that helps. Well, I tell you what, they won't understand a word that you said. They just
I should be on a salary there. I should be getting money for that ABC for helping you out. Why don't you take that tidbit given to you by a crazy conspiracy theorist and you run with it and you see what you can come up with?
Well, interesting that what they'll do is they'll go to Norman Swan, as they've done, and they'll go to Paul Griffin, and they'll go to all the usual suspects who are trained to be blinkered into areas that aren't allowed to be scrutinised. But isn't it interesting? 10 specific different cancers. So my first thought would be, out of those listing those cancers, is I'd then go and look up for official literature, which will be limited, but it is certainly out there. How many of those cancers match up to side effects from a certain experimental medication that a massive amount of Australians had to do? And don't you think that it's interesting that Australia is leading it, but Australia was one of the leaders in terms of number of people officially meant to have been jabbed in that period? So exactly. So that's a correlation. Now, here's my favorite line that every doctor in denial says to me.
I know you're going to say.
Correlation doesn't prove causation. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so if I was a police detective and I was looking at something and my partner says to me, so who do you like and who do you like for this one? And I would say, well, actually, I like the mRNA and these are my reasons. Now, if that was the case, they'd be like, okay, and then you would look at it and then they would start digging and they would start asking questions and they would start gathering evidence.
It's a gene therapy. It's not a flu jab.
So again, there's so many reasons here, but the act of denial. Now, here is the entire problem, and it's probably the theme for today's show. I think what we're going to end up working out today is that there is a fundamental flaw in the work that we in the independent media do. Because I relate it entirely to the Jeffrey Epstein story that everyone is waiting for us to talk about today.
We've got to go there, Jason.
So if we're going to do it, let's just set up where we're going. So we learnt yesterday, and I'll just try and find the headlines for you just to reiterate where we are. Jeffrey Epstein, in the particular case, there was a memo that came out that didn't look entirely official, but it's pretty much at this stage is official, saying that that basically, despite the fact that there is a ton of evidence and video, etc., none of it amounts to anything that anyone is even going to be investigated for, questioned, or indicted for doing it, which is shocking. So it turned up in Axios, and how it turns up in Axios as an exclusive is kind of weird in itself. So exclusive story, the Department of Justice and the FBI conclude that Jeffrey Epstein had no client list and committed suicide. Then there's this video, this 11-hour video, and what's weird is that there's breaks in the time code as you scroll through it, so it doesn't seem to be sequential, and I didn't have the patience to go through and try and work out the reasons why that's considered to be 100% official. It just didn't look that way, but whatever. Irrelevant. No one cares about the Epstein suicide as much as they care about what he did and who was involved. So in this little red box here, this systemic review revealed no incriminating client list. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against any uncharged third parties. But above that, it says that the files relating to the Epstein include a large volume of images of Epstein, images and videos of victims who are either minors or appear to be minors, and over 10,000 downloaded videos and images of illegal, let's call it material, and other material. Teams of agents, analysts, attorneys, and privacy, went through this documentary evidence with the aim of providing as much information as possible to the public while simultaneously protecting victims. Much of the material is subject to court-ordered sealing. Only a fraction of this material would have been aired publicly had Epstein gone to trial, as the seal served only to protect victims and did not expose any third parties to allegations of illegal wrongdoing. They had 300 gigs of material, thousands of images. So presumably all of it was of Epstein and of the victims and of no one else. And after what we had heard, and in the raid on the property back in the day, in the Biden era, one would expect that there would be compromising material. So the questions remain, are there, is there or not? And how many more questions that actually exist. Now, it was former CIA agent Buck Sexton, who was on Fox News. And I think this is worthwhile to get his perspective as well. And we'll come back and we'll continue.
So let's just take a step back for a second here. We were told by people with access that there was a lot more coming. And now they drop a Sunday night memo saying, sorry, there's no there in any capacity whatsoever, case closed. That's just not going to fly. There needs to be more of an explanation about things like, for example, where did all of his money come from? And let me be clear, maybe this information is more available or is out there. The FBI and others, the DOJ, could make this something that's pretty easy, I think, for people to get their hands on. They should do so. Where did the money come from? Why were there so many levels of systemic failure within the justice system to actually get any real prosecutions going of this individual, given the 1,000 victims they estimate that he victimized over the course of his heinous acts? Why is it that so many people with connections into the government thought there was more going on here? There's a lot here. Well, now, maybe some of this is evidence that was destroyed previously by the administration. I think that's quite possible. I don't believe some people have been flipped in this Trump administration stuff that's out there, knowing the individuals who are involved. But they may only be able to work with what they have. And what they have, it seems, certainly isn't enough to answer all the questions that the public has.
Well, Jason, that former CIA analyst had his say. So let me have my say. The only thing that makes sense. Let me theorize on this massive conspiracy for a second, which I seem to be well known for. My theory on this conspiracy is that this is an issue of national security that would alert the general public to the fact that potentially the CIA, hi guys, and Mossad, hi guys, colluded in a honey trap situation to use Jeffrey Epstein to get nasty videos and little black books on leaders and monarchy and all kinds of important people around the globe prior to this period in history, so that they had levers, i.e. blackmail, to be able to make sure that they towed the line. If it was a national security issue in that regard, what we're seeing happening now would be happening. Unfortunately, there's that clip that won't go away because the internet's forever of Pam Bondi saying that she'd seen them and that there were videos of Jeffrey Epstein with children. So she obviously found this other issue out after the fact. But it's unfortunate because too many tidbits have been leaked out to the public now. The public are baying for blood. The problem is this was likely used to precede the engineered pandemic, the financial collapse of the Five Eyes nations, the mass migration, the chemtrailing of the skies. And they do not want the general public, us who are already starting to do it, putting two and two together, Jason. It's Occam's razor. It's the only thing that makes sense.
It is very good analysis to think that the only way that you can put it to bed at that point, the way that it had been after all of that suggestion, is because it's hiding something, and national security is the one thing that they can get away with each and every time.
Yeah.
We would argue that that's just unacceptable. It effectively means that we are being running by a criminal cartel. That's it.
Well, it's in the public interest. It's in the public interest. Look, a normal person, this guy who was at a childcare centre in Melbourne, he's not going to get away with paedophilia. That's guaranteed, right? So if you're saying that there are billionaires and intelligence agencies that are allowed to get away with paedophilia, as long as it means they've got something on people, no. They know that we will realize it's lawless and that we are not equal under the law. And that's something they really don't want us to find out.
No, absolutely. Let's play that clip now of Pam Bondi. We'll get it into the record on the Daily Australian for you.
James Comer said yesterday that all the Epstein files are missing. Can you confirm that? We still haven't heard from you.
No, the FBI, they're reviewing, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn. And there are hundreds of victims. And no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going through that. I haven't seen that statement.
So there it is on the record, like it said in the report, but that no one will get charged. It just doesn't make sense, does it? That it feels like that something's been destroyed or something's not allowed to get out. But
she didn't get that memo. She didn't get that memo before that day, Jason.
Well, Dan Bongino's silent, Kash Patel's silent, Pam Bondi's silent. We did hear from Carolyn Levitt in the press room when Peter Doocy asked some questions. I'll play that one for you now.
Client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk.
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network, on Fox News.
Got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars. They have an operation going on right now called Summer Heat, which has our murder rate trending in the lowest direction in United States history. Their emphasis on violent crime and locking up violent criminals has led to the arrest of 14,000 violent criminals. That's a 62% increase from the same time period last year. So this Attorney General and the FBI Director are committed to putting bad people behind bars where they belong. They promised an exhaustive review. That's what they did. For any further details, I would refer you to the Department of Justice. Okay.
Jason, I really like her, but that was the clunkiest response I've ever seen. So she basically tries to rebrand what we were told about what was on the desk and then starts talking about, bad people are brought to justice and look, the murder rates are down. Methinks you protest too much. Look, we're never going to know, are we? Look how far away we are from JFK, 9/11, the moon landing, whatever conspiracy you want to believe. We're never going to know. It's too soon. It's too close to what all of this preceded for these intelligence agencies to be exposed, that they are in fact themselves lawbreakers.
Well, I was kind of waiting to see what the reaction from different parts were. So generally the Trump MAGA influencers and journalists have come out just really just disappointed more than anything else and asking real questions. Liz Crokin said that she wanted to wait 3 days to see what the fallout was. Lionel Nation was out there today asking some very serious questions, including, what is Trump's real connection? So he was confused beyond belief. I've never seen Lionel Nation lost for words. He's one of the most articulate, brilliant speakers that you'd ever see, and he just couldn't come up with a sentence. Was his scenario. We also saw Colin Rugg. He had some points to make. Benny Johnson, others that have come out and said things. Even Clandestine was kind of on the fence a little bit. But what I find interesting was what Trump said himself. I'll put that up on the screen for you now. So he says the FBI under the direction of Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino is back to the basics, locking up criminals and cleaning up America's streets. We have the greatest law enforcement professionals in the world, but politics and corrupt leadership often prevented them from doing their job. That is no longer the case, and now they have unleashed to do their jobs, and they are doing just that. Keep it up, make America safe again. So I wonder what that statement actually means. Are they saying
It's
that
distraction again.
did the former administration get to destroy evidence, and now that the tables have been cleaned and we've gone through it, that we're going to satisfy everything in terms of the American people who trust us, and therefore we wipe the slate clean and move on from here? Is that literally how this works? That once again, those in authority, those in power, those that were able to have some whatever privilege they were, because you can't have 300 gigabytes of material, thousands of images, and them of underage children on their own, making these whatever they're doing for these photographs, and only Jeffrey Epstein being there. It just simply doesn't add up. Why would Jeffrey Epstein keep images of himself in these situations and no one else? That of course makes no sense as well. And why the hell did Ghislaine Maxwell go to jail for 20 years? Like, what was actually happening there?
Epstein and Maxwell were working. They were on the job. I'm not saying they weren't rampant pedophiles themselves and child sex traffickers. They were more than happy to do that. But I do believe they were on the job. They were following orders. They were working for an extremely high power, and they probably didn't know what the greater plan was. But they knew that it was a honey trap. They knew that they were ensnaring the most important people in the world, creating a society clique. I used to see this when I worked in film and television. You create a society clique, a VIP clique behind the velvet rope, where only a select group of people are allowed to go. Only a select group of people are invited. And it is a mixture of young girls, models, actresses, politicians, and billionaires. That's who's in the soup in that scenario. And in that scenario, it is not hard to lure, in particular men, but I would say women as well, into a situation where you could have something on them, which would mean they were under your control, Jason, for the rest of their lives and the rest of their careers. Who knows? They could even have stuff on Bill Gates.
Yeah, well, imagine that, right? Now, Jeffrey Epstein was certainly in positions of great power and connected to people of great power. He had all this money from this particular hedge fund that he ran, $500 million in the account or something, give or take, when he died or officially died, and now we have to accept all of that stuff. And it just all seems such a mystery. But he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations from 2005 for 15 years. So he's not a nobody by that regard. Like, here it is. This is from the Washington Post from 2019.
Imagine that was your job. Okay, so you're on the Council for Foreign Relations, who is, if you're to believe it, was in with the Club of Rome, the Committee of 300, and these were the people that decided there aren't enough resources in the world for, 8-9 billion people. And then you're given the task, you're given a brownstone house in New York, you're given a hedge fund that you can use as your private bank account, a hedge fund that we will never know which corporations, which businesses, which super funds put money into that. So that's money laundering. That's racketeering 101, right? So that he could use it to buy a private island, to buy a brownstone in New York, to have private jets, to fly around. Wasn't one of his private jets listed as a government plane? I mean, does it get any more suspicious? And they tell you that guess what your assignment is for the next 10 to 15 years. You're going to get massages from underage girls, and you're going to lure as many important people around the globe as possible into your shenanigans. You know, I think was he a single guy? He didn't have children. I know he wanted lots of little Epstein children. Apparently people have reported that. But, you know, it's not a bad job as an agent, is it? And at the time, nobody knew. None of us knew. We didn't know who this guy was until after the fact. And him and Ghislaine Maxwell, who's likely a triple agent for MI5, Mossad, and CIA. You're not really a triple agent, are you? Because all of those departments we now know work together. So what we've stumbled upon here on public record is a secret operation. So it's now on public record that there was this secret operation going on. They'd like to, you know, weave the narrative, as Klaus Schwab says, and give us a story time for 5-year-old. They're there, nothing to see here, please go away. Unfortunately, the genie is already out of that box. So I don't think we're all going to go away quietly.
If there was a list, or at least if there were people that thought they were on a list, so people who attended, people who got up to no good on that particular island would now be breathing a massive sigh of relief, or at least starting to think that they might be well in the clear.
Yeah.
So I wonder how many of those people will come out in the next days, weeks, months and just have a different attitude in the public, or maybe come back out into the public after being in hiding for so long.
Hillary Clinton will come back. Hillary Clinton will come back because her husband's in the clear. Oh, bless.
So that's just interesting to observe. Now, the other thing, of course, is bringing up the old Q post. They did say way back in the beginning that some of these crimes would be so heinous that 70 to 90% of them may not ever be exposed. And I'm just rough figures there. Now, anyone reading that who wants the truth thinks that that is entirely unacceptable along the way. Julian Assange said 70 or 90% of DC would go down if all the truth came out.
Probably.
What I can't accept about that, and it's the same thing with the whole, you know, off-planet intelligence, technology, etc. Why are we considered to be so pathetic that we can't accept reality or truth, and we have to live in this pretend fantasy matrix that's been made for us?
Because the entire world, and Julian Assange also said this, the entire world, communist countries, democratic countries, the entire world is run under the directorship, like a movie, of Washington. That's what Julian Assange said. There is no Australia. Your bosses are in Washington. All of our bosses are in Washington. And why did we just go through the worst 5 years in human history? Because the deep state was running Washington, and therefore running the rest of the world. And oh my goodness, didn't the rest of the world all walk in lockstep, Jason? Because the bad guys, Darth Vader was in charge in Washington, and a black cloud spread across this planet, the likes of which have never been seen. Now, a different person is in Washington. And what do you think? It would literally make Donald Trump's position unstable as president of the United States of America if he allowed it to become known that the United States of America, even under the directorship of his enemies, the deep state, if they are the opposing party, let's keep it pedestrian, even if it was under their directorship, their instruction, their orders, it doesn't matter. It still makes his position vulnerable were he to expose them, because it's a part of a machinery that he's now part of, right? I'm now starting to think China, even Russia, Iran, the lot of them get their orders, and in the case of Iran, crates of money from Washington. The whole planet is a movie, and it's scary to say the words, The Truman Show. I don't think it's as extreme as that, But if you can keep this movie of endless overseas wars, endless engineered pandemics, endless climate emergencies, endless financial emergencies, you are destroying the lives of the 99%. You are minimizing the lives of the 99%. Well, because they're destroying the planet, because they won't take health advice, because they won't pay their bills, because they expect democracy to work. And when they vote their guy to get in, not Joe Biden. It's a very difficult situation. Do you think the world would accept, Jason, that Washington tells your countries what to do and not your prime minister, not even your king? I don't know that there are many people that could accept that.
Well, the funny thing is, I think most people accept that that's probably what's going on anyway.
Not most people.
That there is a superpower that controls the world. And if we saw the events recently that China and Russia were nowhere in relation to the Israel-Iran situation, and it was solved in a matter of days, like that shows you that there is a genuine hierarchy. There's talk now of the ceasefire between Israel and Gaza, Ukraine, Russia. Nothing seems to come of it. It just takes days and days before you get a response. And the opposite happened over there. So who's in control? We don't know. And will that result in changes positively or negatively for the way we view and see the world? It all operates on confidence. You start with belief and then you operate on confidence, which is less than belief. But business confidence, for example, is a thing that is measured, and business confidence genuinely tells you if the economy is going to improve or not. If there's no business confidence, a perfect example, people think that inflation is bad. One thing that's worse than inflation is deflation. For example, if you are selling your home for $1 million and you're in a period of deflation, somebody says, oh, yeah, I'll buy your home for $950,000. And you go, oh, maybe I'll have to take that. And then you accept it. And then the person says, no, I'm going to change my mind because tomorrow it's only going to be worth $900,000. No one sells a home in a period of deflation. So there's nothing happens there. So you're literally stuck. The same applies for any goods and services that you're selling. I'll just wait until next week. It'll be cheaper. So the one who's holding the cash has got all the power in that scenario. Inflation, of course, is bad because the buying power for the effort that you're doing, we all understand that. So there are many things in terms of confidence, but when you have no confidence in government and no confidence in the alternative government and no confidence in the independent government, the outside government, and we're not even talking about that directly, we're talking about the appointments of the government in terms of the directors of the FBI and of the Department of Justice, and you look at it and you think, well, if this is all there is, then we've got nothing left. The other side of it is this. The wake-up call for us here in the independent media is that we can scream from the rooftops as much as we want, but unless we become better detectives at what we are doing to bring this to the surface, it's all for nothing. I'm reminded of a book I bought from Jerome Corsi about Clinton crimes, and I can't remember the exact name. It was a green cover. Partners in Crime it was. When I read this book, it blew me away, absolutely blew me away. I thought, how are these people not in handcuffs? Now, I've been lucky enough to interview Jerome Corsi, I think 4 times now, and I love speaking to this man. He's just a brilliant mind, and we talk about all sorts of issues, the Clintons, JFK, he wrote this book last year, and current situations. Now, he has known Trump for 30 years, so he has kind of, an indirect or a direct access depending on the time and day. Now, if that man can't get to the truth and can't make a difference, and largely these days has been, sort of by the wayside, a man, he's an octogenarian or thereabouts. So where do we go next? How do we improve on that as opposed to changing what that is? Now, everything that we seem to see in the world today is getting diluted one way or another. The quality of goods, the quality of food, the quality of the air, the quality of the water, everything's worse. And that's what I mean, mainstream media, if you're still watching, that there is no metric that's better. Our air quality is not better. What we eat is not better. Our health is not better.
Happiness is not better.
Yeah, that's right. Our insulin levels, our insulin spikes are up. More people are on insulin, etc. So how can we say that the government of the day is even remotely competent, and so that you have to change direction and do different things? Now, I guess where we're going to sort of deviate the narrative here on today's show is I want to show you this headline. So RFK Jr., as head of the Health and Human Services, he's now being sued. The medical cartel is suing RFK Jr. for pulling the COVID shot recommendation for kids and pregnant women. Despite overwhelming evidence of harm, captured medical groups are fighting to keep poisoning children, pregnant women, and their unborn babies, if you can believe that, from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Are they suing him personally?
Well, the story is, and I'm just going to pull up some more details for you.
Because they don't want this to end then, right? They really don't want this to end if they're suing him. There are these plans, and the World Health Organization amendment to treaty and all that. There are these plans to do it again. He's put a spanner in the works on the next Pandemic 2 that Bill Gates and Melinda Gates were so excited about. Oh, you won't miss Pandemic 2. He's put a spanner in the works there because they also want to inject pregnant women and babies. Oh dear, enter stage left, RFK. What's going on?
Well, this is it. So from the story, Nick Holscher wrote, the cartel is demanding a federal judge reinstate COVID shot recommendations for children and pregnant women and block HHS from enforcing or promoting RFK Jr.'s May directive that removed them. They argue Kennedy's directive violates norms by bypassing the CDC and its ACIP panel and undermines their ability to push the shot to patients and secure insurance coverage. The plaintiffs claim Kennedy lacked evidence, but that's a lie. In fact, there is overwhelming data, fully justifies pulling the shots. And then what he's done, Nick, in the article is he's just gone through article after article proving it. Meanwhile, solely based on the mechanism of action of COVID-19 mRNA injections instructing cells in various organ systems, including the reproductive system, to produce toxic spike protein, it can be assumed that COVID-19 genetic injections are not safe for pregnant women and developing baby. More than 5 studies have shown severe harms from COVID-19 vaccination during pregnancy. So there it is. They will push and push and push and push and push, and I suppose that's what they're entitled to do. That's what the legal system is all about. But and let's see how it plays out. But we're reminded that RFK Jr. is also a lawyer here, so it's not like there's not going to be a contest.
Yeah, and he's usually done well in court up against pharmaceutical companies as well. But it's like, a baby car seat. And all the data is showing that the baby car seat kills the baby in car accidents. It doesn't survive, when they do the dummy tests. And then, the car seat company taking the government to court because, well, we want to release the car seat anyway. We don't care that it kills babies in accidents, even though we sell it as safe and effective. It wouldn't happen. So why can it happen with pharmaceuticals? And I would imagine that RFK does have a legal target on his back because even though people are disappointed that he hasn't been more heavy-handed with restrictions on the rollout of these mRNAs, they don't like the fact that he uses the correct language. It's not a COVID-19 vaccine, it's gene therapy. And the problem with gene therapy was always when it was trialed on cancer patients, even if it cured the cancer it was administered for, it caused cancers in other areas. That was always the problem with gene therapy and why they never rolled it out. Suddenly they tell us we're all dying of flu. As you said, before the injection rollout, not a single woman under 50 in Australia died of COVID. So why did they roll out a gene therapy that was already proven to be harmful? And why are they fighting to do it again and keep it there? Could it get any darker, Jason? How can we keep reporting on this stuff? And, the common sense not prevail. There is no common sense or logic left in the world. And when did we stop wanting to protect pregnant women and babies, by the way?
And how many times have people been told in a pregnancy not to take anything? I mean, you're not even meant to take Panadol, for goodness sake.
Or soft cheese.
Soft cheese, exactly. There's so many things, that you have to avoid.
Diet Coke. Don't drink Diet Coke because it's got aspartame in it when you're pregnant. That's what they said to me. They said you can drink Fat Coke. You can have all the sugar you want as long as you're not diabetic. But you can't have Diet Coke because of aspartame. Don't have anything with it in. And I never drank them ever again after that. And I used to work for these people. Because I was like, well, if it's not good for me when I'm pregnant, it's not good for me when I'm not pregnant.
Yeah. It makes no sense, does it? But and then of course this whole idea of the weighted risk. So they're measuring, and that totally is subjective at the same point. And of course, what it doesn't take into account.
COVID jabs, Jason, keep getting COVID. They get it 3 or 4 times a year. They test positive for it. They're off work. I mean. What are you saying? We know what's going on here. You and I don't get COVID 3 or 4 times a year because we didn't get the jab.
Yeah, I know. It beggars belief, doesn't it? You sit and you watch it. The other day I walked past the pharmacy in my local area and they had a sign out the front, COVID jabs available here. I'm thinking 5 years on and you're still pushing this stuff. But you know what's interesting was that with Julian McMahon's passing, and there was and Peter Russell Clark's passing, who was 89. Julian was obviously quite young at 56. On social media, when they announced this, where comments are allowed, all the comments refer to the jab, even when it's unrelated. It's just that people have just absolutely had enough, and there doesn't even to be much rebuttal anymore, whether people just don't want to fight it, but a period of denial, etc. But to look, those that have taken it will buy into it. It's the same thing that they want to believe in authority. But I tell you what, when you see that Epstein story, you struggle, and it's the people like us that are struggling to believe in authority in the first place, believe even less in authority. So what happens when the other side stops believing in authority? So I was waiting to see which Democrats would come out against that. And the one I found was Eric Swalwell yet again. Here he is. Why is Trump hiding the Epstein files from you? Any of you clowns who went to the White House earlier this year to play a part in Trump's circus want to wager a guess? So the implication
Eric
is
Swalwell is coming out with anything to do with Epstein after a 2-year sexual affair with Fang Fang, the Chinese spy, while he was on the House Intel Committee, and he remained on the House Intel Committee after the affair with the Chinese spy. Eric Swalwell, get back in your box.
Absolutely. But the point there is that I'm like, well, obviously he's inferring that Trump's on the list. And my attitude is, if Trump is on the list, I want to know, because I will be the first one to call him out for it. I'm not afraid of it. On the contrary, I want to know. And so Eric Swalwell and I agree on one thing, we want to know, but I just think it's a little bit hypocritic that Eric Swalwell's the one out there. He who screams the loudest is always very interesting. Now, speaking of... Yes, where are they, in fact? Now, speaking of Trump, always in the news, I want to just bring up this story. I think it's terrific. It's to do with the environment, etc. And this is the first thing that I'm going to bring up for you. So, according to the Big Beautiful Bill, and this is from the Carbon Brief publication, it will blow out the US emissions goal by 7 billion tonnes. Well, he's already said that carbon dioxide is not a poisonous gas, and so he doesn't believe in it openly. But the Big Beautiful Bill and its policies to pull back from the EV mandate and other things will allow more emissions into the air. That's fine. Where I'm going with this particular story is here there has been a BRICS meeting, and the BRICS meeting has demanded that wealthy nations fund the global climate transition. The leaders at the Rio Summit stressed that climate finance obligations, the joint summit notes important role for fossil fuels, so they still believe in them. But Lula of Brazil blasts the climate denialism, eroding past achievements. So Trump's attitude is simple. He threatens an extra 10% tariff for countries aligning themselves with anti-American BRICS policies, realizing that, of course, that America has pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. So in other words, if you're pro-climate and you want money off us, well, we're going to do the opposite. You're not getting any, and we're going to slug you with another 10% tariff. So that is the first time is a real line in the sand in terms of the whole green climate policy palaver. Trump's not having a bar of it. We played yesterday that clip from Chris Smith saying the disaster that's happening here in Australia. And of course, in Australia, we're already hearing reports that we already met these targets anyway. So what the hell are we worried about? But of course, it all comes down to this fear that the global average temperature will increase from 15 degrees Celsius to 16.5 degrees and possibly go to 17.1 degrees.
It's bloody freezing.
And there's the other point. And then they complain that methane causes heating 20 times more than carbon dioxide. So let me share you this story that you probably aren't aware of. Check this out. A major satellite has suddenly disappeared. It is likely not recoverable. Well, this particular satellite just happens to be a methane satellite. You ready for this?
Oh.
There is such a thing, right?
It's got a nose, does it?
So, a satellite designed to monitor human-made methane emissions has gone missing in space.
Human-made? Isn't that farting?
Yeah, human-made methane. Exactly. So, dubbed MethaneSat, the $88 million spacecraft was launched into orbit aboard a SpaceX rocket in March of 2024 and was expected to collect data on the potent greenhouse gas for at least 5 years. For the past 2 weeks, the satellite's operators, the non-profit Environmental Defense Fund, have been unable to establish contact. So in a final blow, Mission Control...
Let me just apologise, Jason. That was my fault. I must have done a particularly raucous fart in bed and blown it out into space.
Oh, you're the one. You're the one. And there I thought that I could have named many contenders. So now, in a final blow, the Mission Control says that MethaneSat has lost power, crushing almost all hope of bringing it back online. It's likely not recoverable, the EDF said in a statement. The cause at this time isn't known, so your theory could be a conspiracy as well, Nicola. An investigation into why communications were lost is ongoing. It's an agonizing loss, especially as the mission, which was backed by Google and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, had proven that its advanced spectrometer instruments could pick out emissions from space and trace them back to their source with remarkable precision.
Jason, I always said that when I was a little kid. I always said, because it was always like whoever smelt it dealt it at school, and I always used to say, I wish that human farts could give off purple smoke so that we always knew who the guilty party was. And let me just say on that brick story quickly, there's a very dangerous and verging on criminal word that is emerging in the climate hoax movement, and that criminal word is obligations, right? So we're all going to be lumped with obligations to save the planet. That means handing over money. That's a heist. That's a theft. We don't have any obligations. We are individuals. Do you know who has obligations with regard to the climate? All of the billionaires and the monarchy who own all of these factories and these corporations and these chemical companies that are chuffing out poison. This has nothing to do with carbon dioxide, just for the air we breathe. Poisonous, noxious chemicals 24/7. Will they close their factories while we're asked to walk or drive on an electric scooter? No, they won't, Jason. So back off. It's all a hoax. And seriously, you put a satellite up there. Elon, I'm disappointed in you, mate. Please, you could have told us that ahead of time. We could have held him in. Come on.
Yeah. Now, in other news, we're kind of going a bit backwards on it, but and it's mainly because we heard this overnight, or in fact yesterday. Erin Patterson has been found guilty on all counts, so it's unlikely that Erin Patterson will spend another day in freedom for the rest of her life for the murders of 3 people and the attempted murder of another, her in-laws there.
Doesn't look like a killer, Jason. Do you think she just accidentally poisoned them?
Well,
it happens.
There is, I mean, the particular legal analyst today said, yes, all murder cases rely on an element of circumstantial evidence to prove state of mind. But there were so many anomalies in her testimony and the negative coincidences that would mean that it's very hard to be able to believe that. And the defense case was quite interesting, even when they talked about the plates, because apparently, so she's made this beef Wellington, but she's cut it individually, so serve them individually or cook them individually. And the idea of a beef Wellington is you use the eye fillet of the steak and use the centerpiece of it, the best piece. So if you haven't got good eye fillet, well, that might be one reason to do it. But why would you bother to make a beef Wellington if you're making it individually? It doesn't make sense. Then, of course, they were put onto different coloured plates. And so the surviving man, whose name escapes me temporarily, he explained that his plate was like a light orangey color. Well, the defense refuted that and they said, no, we don't believe him. He's just made that up. Like, why would you make up the color of your plate, for goodness sake? What they're trying to say is that there was intent in the color of the plate, knowing the dose or something that may have been given. Then when you relay it back to her turning up at the hospital complaining of gastro, checking herself out 5 minutes later, but returning 98 minutes later and then checking herself back in, it's kind of odd. Then you've got the kids with the scraping off of the mushrooms and the food the next day. Then you've got the ex-husband specifically saying that he found it uncomfortable and that's why he rejected the invitation the night before and didn't come. Meanwhile, his parents went along.
Lucky dude.
Absolutely, and there was one extra piece that was prepared because they were talking about the portions there. So look, it's an horrific story. The fact that she was foraging for these mushrooms, the dehydrator, dumping the dehydrator, like there seems to be intent. Now, the other interesting thing was that she was part of a Facebook group that became friendly during COVID, and then it turned into a bit of a chat thing. And she was very good at murder mysteries and solving them and researching them. So that is also. But that also implies that, but you're not inviting people over to eat beef Wellington with foreign mushrooms. So that there was a difference there.
I cooked a turkey last weekend to have like a mini Christmas in July. If you cook a turkey incorrectly, it's killing you, right? So I could have accidentally, suppose I would have poisoned myself. It is a bit suspicious that she's still alive. But do you know that historically in the UK, some of the most successful, and in America actually, some of the most successful female serial killers on earth, on record, were poisoners. And these women were so brazen that when they've had enough of a husband, they would poison him. And in the old days, they didn't have the technology to check. And, you know, he ate something bad and he died, but everyone else is fine. And then they'd remarry. And then when they got bored with that husband, they'd poison them again. And it was only when it got to like the fourth and fifth husband that people started, you know, putting two and two together and going, oh my God, you know, that she's killing off all her husbands. So women are notorious for this. I don't think being into true crime or crime novels necessarily means you're a serial killer. If so, I'm in real trouble. But, I don't know. She looks innocent, but some of the most evil people imaginable have looked quite innocent, haven't they, Jason?
Well, if she's going to get to an appeal or not, she's going to find out a sentencing at a later date. But there is very little risk that she will never.
Don't let her in the
see
kitchen
light
in
of day.
jail. Put her on laundry duty.
But it's funny that you said that, because there was an accusation within the prison system that she tampered with someone's food. That's actually come out yesterday as well. Yes. But what would she be using? You know, rat sack, something like that. Who knows what you would get your hands on? It's just an unbelievable story.
Feces. Apparently that's how they poison you in jail. They put feces in your food. It's the only thing they can get hold of.
There you go. Well, in other news that has only just come to light, the Russian Transport Minister Roman Starovoyt has died by suicide after being sacked. We've learnt that he was the transport minister, and he allegedly shot himself just hours after President Putin dismissed him from his post. He'd have been abruptly fired on Monday after just a year in his key position, according to the New York Post. He was then found dead inside his car in a neighborhood just west of Moscow where Russia's elite reside. He was found with a gun that was an official gift from the Kremlin, officials said, and Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov refused to comment on Starovoyt's dismissal with no reason for his firing listed on the Kremlin's websites. Officials did not give a reason for his reported suicide, so that's a big story that will develop, one would assume, when we find out a little bit more information. And just going the other way on our green theme for today, I thought this was interesting, that Jaguar sales have collapsed 97% in Europe amid a controversial rebrand and EV transition that we all saw last year with that horrible ad. So what they're saying is that since the radical rebrand, the registrations have plummeted 97.5% in April of 2025, where they had 1,600 or something registrations, and now they're down to like 49 registrations in Europe as they transition. The problem with the story is that Jaguar has not been producing any motor vehicles for the period of 2025, so there's no stock. So the only things that are being sold are remaining stock. So that's why there's nothing left to sell, is why they're not selling anything. And it's referred to here, Jaguar's massive sales collapse is actually very misleading, and this is part of the reason. However, what they are doing is moving to very luxurious electric vehicles, and some of them are quite interesting, what we've seen in models, but they are literally retooling the entire brand. But at the same time, they're going to have to find a whole lot of customers, because Jaguar owners aren't necessarily into electric vehicles, hence the reason why they wanted to change into something else. What I don't understand is why you wouldn't
You're
find
a Jaguar owner. Come on, just
Yes.
say it.
Well, I own a Jaguar, but I own a petrol Jaguar, and my Jaguar is pretty cool. It's very responsive and great handling and quite comfortable,
Yeah,
and
it's a
it's
good
been
one.
a terrific car, the one that I have. But what I don't get is why you wouldn't start with an EV arm, for example, and then introduce that ugly logo that you changed and have Jaguar EV. Like Toyota introduced Lexus, like Nissan introduced Infiniti. They're the luxury brand. Have a luxury EV brand. Even Cadillac now is selling the Lyric in Australia. It's an electric vehicle. It's only an EV. So it's a completely different proposition for these motor vehicle manufacturers to introduce it. Now, I haven't seen one on the road, this Cadillac Lyric. I know that they're quite expensive, but it's the first Cadillac that's been sold in Australia as a Cadillac for many, many years. There was attempts 15 or 20 years ago to bring out a particular model. They had them all ready to go. They had made them in right-hand drive. There was 80 of them, and then they pulled the pin, I think it was around the GFC 2008, and they never got here. Those cars were quietly sold out of the dealership into the Australian market, and there's a few of them still floating around. I saw one a couple of years ago during COVID pop up in Western Sydney with very low kilometres on it, but it was nice. The only problem was it was quite dated by that stage, so there was no real value in it, a collector's car, but it was an interesting thing just the same. So the car electric vehicle thing is quite interesting because you've also got with the big beautiful bill in the US, the dropping of the EV mandate and the subsidy. So now they're going to have to compete on their own 2 feet. So
Good.
where will Jaguar go? That's right. Where
Can
will
I-
Jaguar go? Maybe they will just go by the way of the dodo. They might just become extinct.
No, they won't become extinct. They're mechanically fantastic engine-wise when they've got a internal combustion engine. But look, answer me this like I'm 5, right? So Klaus Schwab's big dream was that basically we live in permanent house arrest. They call it lockdown for your own safety, biosecurity threat and all. And that we just live on these deliveries. And in the World Economic Forum videos, there's all these drones not crashing into each other, delivering food and supplies and all this stuff. It never really went like that. Instead, they backed a system where instead of people going about their own business in their own cars, which seemed to work really well, they want you to stay home and they want you to shop on Amazon, right? And what happens? Do these Amazon delivery drivers turn up on electric scooters or in electric vans? No, they're in petrol cars, they're in diesel cars. Then they want you to stay home, not having gone to the supermarket on the way home, and order Uber Eats. Do the Uber Eats guys turn up on electric scooters or in electric cars and vans? No, they don't. They turn up in petrol cars and diesel cars and vans. So what's happened is we've actually got more vehicles on the road because of these food delivery services and all of this shopping online than we ever had before. So these people are complete hypocrites, the Jeff Bezos of the world, you know, the kind of people who want to get rid of plastic straws. You guys are hypocrites. All the corporations are allowed to drive around in as much petrol and diesel as they want, including trains, diesel chugging trains owned by Warren Buffett to deliver fuel, right? Not through the big pipeline that Trump wanted to bring it, which, you know, there was no risk of crashing and there was no diesel fumes. No, they got rid of the pipeline. None of this makes sense, Jason. They're complete hypocrites. What they're basically trying to do is get rid of our gas for cooking and heating and water heaters. Jacinta Allen, the unelected, has already said that in Victoria. They want to get rid of our petrol and diesel vehicles. And even Elon Musk said last week, oh, if you've got a diesel car that's 10 years old, it's going to be a relic. Well, that's me, and it's not a relic. And we're completely dependent on electricity, which they can turn off when there hasn't been enough wind or enough sunshine for solar, while these corporations and billionaires keep using their people in diesel and petrol to deliver their wares. Get lost. Why should we restrict our lives just so that their businesses can do the wrong thing?
And there it is again, isn't it? The invisible hierarchy in the dying days of the age of Pisces, as we try and flip it on its side and create this transparency, and we're kind of stuck right here in the middle.
Jason, all the lefties in their EVs and in their Teslas, sorry to say it, they order Uber Eats, and that comes in petrol and diesel.
I still can't understand that whole concept. Now, the other thing I can't understand is, in Victoria, what is going to happen to the Chinese restaurant in the future if you can't have gas? If you can't cook with gas, you can't have Chinese food. It doesn't work. You can't cook it on an electric stove.
The quality of Chinese food in Victoria has gone down the toilet. I haven't been to the fancy one that's in the city for over 10 years now. It's very, very expensive. So I haven't been there for a long time. But all the others, it's rubbish. You know, they know that they can get away with poor quality. And it's the same for all restaurants. You know, ingredients are up. I did go to a restaurant. I might as well give them a shout out. They didn't know it was me or anything. I went to a restaurant on South Bank before the football at the weekend called Teatro, which was an Italian restaurant. Had the best cosmopolitan cocktail I've had in Australia ever. Oh, God, it was good. The service was fantastic. We sat on the bar and watched the kitchen cook the food. It was so cool because we didn't have a booking and they just let us in. and the pasta that we ate was remarkable. So there are still restaurants out there, and you could see that they were taking their time with the ingredients, that things were flame grilled, they had the charcoal going. It was amazing. But generally, the quality of food is going down, and a lot of fast food restaurants are popping up because they're making the most of the fact that people are poor, and therefore they're making, bad choices with food, unfortunately. So not good.
And at the same time, fast food's never been more expensive. I just find it's prohibitively expensive in many cases.
We can't all eat in $200 a plate restaurants like Dan Andrews and Anthony Albanese when they were in Melbourne.
Yeah, certainly can't do that. So the only way forward is to obviously get better at making your own stuff, which ironically last night we decided to cook 3 separate Chinese dishes at home.
Wow.
So it was like a mini restaurant. We did quite well. And so that was good fun. And maybe that's the point. And we still have a gas stove. So it makes a difference. But yeah, look, you're right. Like here in Sydney, Chinatown is not what it used to be by any means. Growing up there, it was just fabulous. Today, it's hard to find a restaurant that meets the quality of what you can get in suburban Chinese restaurants, and you don't have to pay the heavy price, the parking. And there's one restaurant we used to go to as kids, but it's now that expensive that I just can't go there anymore. I just can't pay $50 for a Chinese dish, and that's where kind of a starting point. It's like, where do we get to this level? That makes no sense to me either. And so, yeah, just get better at doing your own. That was the one good thing about COVID, was teaching you to become self-sufficient and perfecting areas where you missed out, and that was obviously in cooking. So look, we get to the end of another episode, and we look at the world that we're in, and I'm really interested in knowing from our viewers what they think on the Epstein side of things, on the obviously on the Erin Patterson story is an interesting one, on what we've heard about RFK in terms of being sued, and the environmental stuff and the BRICS, etc. There's just so many dynamics going on. I just feel like today is one of those days where you feel that whilst we're heading in a certain direction, something new is coming. It was one of those times when it wasn't a great day for positivity, but we navigate what we see, and then in 24 hours it'll change again. Something else will pop out, and we'll take another direction. I just reminded for mine, it just makes me want to work harder, get better at what I do, and realize that in order to change narratives, we are the people sitting in the seats at the moment. There'll be new people that will pop up and get better at it than what we are, presumably in the future. But this is the pathway out, and you're not served by being a PR department to government that's not serving us. That's where the mainstream, where our differences are. But at the same time, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone and to myself get better, to help you guys get better, even though you're going to dismiss me as some lunatic. But that's where I sit on this, and I am only determined to get better. I won't get worse at this anymore than I am. I will only get better from this point. So therefore, we will have to use that as part of the way forward to get to the truth, get to the reality, and get the monkey off our back once and for all, because I know for one, I can't live in a world where I'm told what to do by some octogenarian lunatic in Switzerland telling me I can't do it. It's not happening. And I know that there are millions more like me, Nicola.
Yeah, I would argue that it's always a good news day when we're well enough to do the Daily Australian. And that's thanks to you guys that we are fully fed and watered. Thank you so much for supporting the show, so we can get up each day and bring the news to you, or at least discuss what they're telling us is news. So thanks again for watching the Daily Australian with myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host, Jason Olbourne. We'll do this all over again on Hump Day tomorrow.